So it really is imperative to understand that the policies that are being carried out right now are not accidental. They're not failures. They're actually successes on a multitude of levels, and all of this has been articulated in the past. Cannot emphasize enough the need to read Oded Yonan's A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s. Basically, everything we see playing out in the Middle East right now comes from that very document. The goal is for an expansion of Israel. It's known as the Greater Israel Project. And under this delusional psychopathic plan, the goal is for Israel to expand into Lebanon, into Syria, into Iraq, Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia, and down into Egypt, from the River Euphrates up in the north down to the River Nile in the south. And the way to achieve this goal is effectively by destabilizing and causing fractions within society, especially along sectarian lines, to effectively balkanize the surrounding states into a weakened, fractured state where the Arabs literally, quote, bleed each other. And so the policies that have been carried out in Libya, in Syria, in Lebanon as well, also in Egypt with these revolutions and all of the kind of shit stirring that's going on there, into Yemen and Saudi Arabia. When we look at the policy, we find that there are those that are cooperating in this game, and then there are those who are against it. And the ones who are against it are the ones we villainize, of course. That would be Iran, and that would be Hezbollah in Lebanon, and also the Palestinians, of course. The allies that we have to apparently move in the right direction are Israel. Okay, any honest look at Israel makes clear that it's running the United States effectively through its overall intentions and its absolute infiltration of our government. Saudi Arabia is probably our next best friend. This is the most grotesque monstrosity of a nation on the planet, and it's one of our best friends and allies. The last arms deal was worth $60 billion to Saudi Arabia. So we've got Israel and Saudi Arabia as our two best friends, and then we look at all of the completely bought and paid for puppet governments of the Gulf states, and we look to a nation like Turkey as an example, which has knowingly now at this point been running these psychopaths called ISIS across the border, training them, providing sanctuary for them, finance for them, and ultimately buying their oil to the point that hundreds of tankers a day are traveling from the oil fields that ISIS, so-called ISIS, runs, and that oil is going into Turkey, and guess where it ends up? Israel. We also find that ISIS has never once attacked Israel or Saudi Arabia on any meaningful level, but Israel remains unattacked by ISIS and, by the way, Al-Qaeda. Never in their entire history have they managed to attack Israel, but they attack everyone else, especially Muslims. Isn't that interesting? And when we look at the actual policy and the relationship we have to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, we will find, if we're serious, that we are, in fact, Al-Qaeda, and we are ISIS.
The people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
We have created these Frankensteins to justify these insane policies. And you look at our best friend and ally Saudi Arabia, anyone who thinks that is not the main funder of so-called ISIS and Al-Qaeda is absolutely ignorant. Bottom line, that is the major funder, our good friend and ally Saudi Arabia. The Wahhabi, Takfiri, nasty, ugly, women have no rights at all Saudi Arabia, our good friend and ally. That nation has been financing these bastards who run around cutting off people's heads, and these people come from all around the world. They are not from Syria. Most of them are not from Syria. They are foreigners who were paid as mercenaries to go in and basically wreak havoc, to wreak absolute havoc. This is all part of a grander plan, ultimately to weaken and fracture all the surrounding states. Syria is clearly been targeted because indeed Bashar al-Assad is not a puppet. He is not lying.
How do you think that the people in the West question your legitimacy?
This intervention in Syria matters. I don't care about it, to be frank. I never care about it, as long as I have the public support of the Syrian people. That's my legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from the inside. But why? I will tell you why. Because the West used to have puppets, not independent leaders or officials in any other country. And that's the problem with Putin. They demonize Putin because he can say no and he wants to be independent, because the West, especially the United States, don't accept partners. They only accept followers. Even Europe is not a partner of the United States. That's to be very frank with you. So this is their problem with Syria. They need somebody to keep saying yes, yes man, a puppet, marionette, and so on.
Yet whether you love him or hate him, he is not our man. Saddam Hussein was our best friend and ally for a long time, until apparently he wasn't quite fitting the bill anymore, and then he became Hitler. This is the same pattern we see over and over again. The bottom line is that this policy is intended to completely destroy all of the Middle Eastern nations aside from Israel, so that nation of Israel, the Jewish state of Israel, can expand. This is the goal. And they've laid it out very clearly. And everything we see makes perfect sense when you understand it in that way. But if you listen to anything the mainstream is saying, they set it up in terms of we're fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Anyone who even touts that line is already operating from the ground up on a false premise. That is not true. We are not fighting Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The CIA and Mossad and MI6 are ISIS. And that's the bottom line. And if you want to keep believing that we're actually fighting this shit, and you want to send off more American sons and daughters to go fight some fucked up war where they're going to come back with such problems that some of them are going to end up committing suicide at the point we are now 22 a day committing suicide. If people want more of that, then let's get involved in another war in the Middle East and send American sons and daughters off, or fuck them up psychologically as well by having them fly planes around and drop bombs on innocent people. Because even that, while keeping our troops so safe, is scarring them in ways that they'll never recover from. So we need to get out of all this stuff and understand that the policy is being carried out as the rulers of the world dictate it to be. And all of our puppets in power are in fact traitors who need to be arrested for violating their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Every single one of them who has voted for any of these laws, NDAA or the so-called Patriot Act 1 and 2, are you kidding me? These are an affront to anyone who believes in the U.S. Constitution, and every red-blooded American patriot should be fucking angry to the core that these son of a bitches continue to run and exert the power of this nation, literally, and involve us in wars that make no sense for anyone, including ourselves. This is the reality, and that's the Middle East in a nutshell.